It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
Welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, September 4th, 2022, and I am your host, student Dr. Ben, and joining me today is the cooler trans person in the room and the knower of crab facts, Katy Mongomerie. Katy, do you have a crab fact for us today?
I do. You're going straight in with a crab fact, are you? I was thinking, like, are they going to bombard me with crab fact requests? So I thought I'd need to look up some. I do. Is that what you want to start with?
Absolutely. This is why we bring you on the show, Katy.
Here's my cool crab fact, and it is relevant, and perhaps some people who don't believe in evolution could call in and debate this with us. But crabs evolved like 200 million years ago, which is a long time ago. And it's actually before flowers evolved, which is pretty cool. But even cooler than that, crabs evolved before the planet Saturn had rings.
Whoa.
I just think that's mad. Like, so there were crabs like looking up at the night sky. Well, I mean, I guess crabs' vision isn't good enough to look up at the night sky and see Saturn's rings. But like, at the time they were doing that, it just didn't have any rings. I just like Saturn's so iconic, and I think in Saturn's like life cycle as a planet, it's not going to have rings forever. So we're actually quite lucky. Humans have evolved in this time window where we can see like one of the most beautiful things in the night sky, and crabs will probably outlive us. Because as we know, like crabs have independently evolved 5 times at least in like the history of the Earth. So quite possibly crabs will see before and after Saturn has rings, and maybe even before and after flowers exist. So that's cool crab fact number 1 of the day. We'll see if we can cram some more in as the show goes on.
Yeah, that's a super cool crab fact. And if anybody in the audience believes in young Earth creationism or does not believe that crabs evolved at all, this is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So you can get your calls in at 512-991-9242, or you can go through your computer at tiny.cc/callth. We have a few callers on the lines already, but as we get ready to bring them onto the show, I'd like to share a few announcements. Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion and government. If you like what you see on the show, there are ways that you can support Talk Heathen and the ACA. First of all, you can go support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. Please, if you can, like the video and subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and comment below on your favorite caller. You can also become a channel member. Click the join button below the video, and you'll get custom chat emotes, and you'll help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Community of Austin. Below the live chat, we have a fundraiser. 100% of the proceeds go directly to the ACA, and YouTube does not take anything out of that. So, multiple ways you can support the channel. If you like what you see, of course, the live chat is also available. Let us know if you are enjoying the show. But that being said, Katy, are you ready for some callers?
Yeah, why not? Let's go for it. That's I'm always ready for callers, 24/7.
All right, let's talk to Humanist Reformation, he, him from Oregon. You are live on Talk Heathen.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
How can we help you today? What's your claim you're bringing?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a claim that you don't need faith with Christianity, all you need to do is look at the facts to really see that it is completely bogus. And I want to use the Word of God to do that.
So do you say?
And
Sorry,
so,
Did you say you're going to use facts to prove that the Bible is bogus? Is that what did I hear that correctly?
from the Word of God. So
okay. So are you?
Power and authority.
I just want to clarify. Are you in favor of Christianity, or are you opposed?
I'm opposed to any religion where the person saying that they are a prophet, a son of God, or God can't get their words right. So I would say I'm opposed.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Go for it. Which words?
So you want to dig into the Word of God? You guys ready?
Yeah. Go for it.
Let's do it.
All right. So we'll be concentrating on Matthew 10, chapter 10, Matthew chapter 16, and Matthew 24. If you guys want to follow along. Let's start with Matthew 24, verse 34. Jesus is speaking with his disciples. They ask him, if you want to look at the very beginning of Matthew 24, they ask him, when will the temple be destroyed? What are the signs of his coming, and when's the end of the age? Or when will these things be? Jesus was referencing the destruction of the temple at that time. And so by Matthew 34, he goes down and says, assuredly, so he's giving his promise, I say to you, he's talking to his disciples, this generation will by no means pass away until all these things take place, all of them. And he lists them out in between, the first verse and 34. And one of the things he says in Matthew 24:30 is the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the heavens, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with great power and glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds and from one end of the heavens to the other. So this did not happen, clearly. Like the trumpet was never sounded. The tribes of all the earth did not mourn before the disciples' generation passed away. In Matthew 10, he is talking to them again, and in Matthew 10:23, he says, they will persecute you in this city, flee to another, for verily I say to you, you shall not have gone through all the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. Well, they got through all the cities of Israel and then some, and the Son of Man never came. And then in Matthew 16, he says, where is it? Sorry.
I guess I get the gist that there's several things that, like, the point here is that God made some predictions, and sounds like they didn't literally come true. Yeah. So I guess if I was like
18:20 through 22 is clear about that you need to get your words right.
Yeah, but I guess if I know what Christians often do, and I guess maybe having like a debate between two atheists, like any Christians watching might be like, this is kind of garbage. But if I was gonna devil's advocate, which is kind of a pun here, I would say maybe that like in your first example, saying about these things haven't happened before, like the generation is over. You might be like, well, what does a generation mean? Like when we say generation, sometimes we mean like one person's lifetime, and you could be like your mother's generation and your generation and your daughter's generation or something. They're three generations.
Well,
but also we sometimes
common
use the word
of the word.
Yeah, that's one of the common usage. But another common usage might be that I'm a millennial, and like millennials is like a big span, and there's people who could actually maybe even be
a millennial is a generation.
Yeah, but like I guess the point I'm saying is that some people might use generation for different words, and I personally wouldn't do this, but this is probably one of the many reasons why I'm not a Christian. But you might say, well, generation could be like the generation of Christians, as in like we had a previous huge like time of humans, which was pre-Christianity, and then we've got like the generation of the disciples and all of the people who followed them and everyone who believes their word, and then maybe there's like another one after, and you could do some kind of word game over generation. I don't know. I would be interested to hear.
Christians do love to do word games, But if you look at Matthew 23, Jesus says the same thing using the same Greek words, and they do not translate that as meaning some other generation. He's talking to the Pharisees in Matthew 23 and says, this generation, as he talks to the Pharisees. The only thing different is he's talking to the disciples in Matthew 24, and he gets his words wrong, so then Christians have to come around and try and reinterpret the text just like other failed religions and cults have to do. But they're not reinterpreting the text in those failed cults and religions because they got their words right. They're reinterpreting it because it's utterly wrong. And
yeah, I think it's a good point here is that as not just like in some religions and cults and stuff, like you were saying about, we can look at they might make a clear prediction like the world is going to end in 1993 or whatever, and it doesn't, and then you'll watch them in real time interpreting, and they're like, oh no, I didn't mean 1993, I meant 2003 or whatever. And that's
exactly. It's always, but it's because they're wrong, not because they're right.
Yeah, for sure. But what is interesting is if your religion has room for interpretation at all, how do you know that your current interpretation is the correct one at any point? Like, I think that's what
they say that it's the power and authority of God's word, and God's word may have many reinterpretations by people, but there's only one written word of God. And we can point to those Greek words in there and know what they were saying back in that time. Like, we have those facts.
All language is dependent on the context of the time in which it's said and the people which are around you.
Right, exactly.
The understanding of all this kind of stuff. So even if God was to write exactly the most precise wording he could, it would still have like some underlying assumptions.
It's the word of God. It's the word of God. At least that's what we have to make the assumption, and that's what Christians assume too. So we have to assume that what he said is what he wanted all of mankind to read out of his word. And so we can all see the words on the page. We can all look back into the Greek and know all this information.
You probably shouldn't have written it in Greek if you wanted me to.
We have a lot of information on.
Yeah, here's my thought, and it's a little difficult because we're all non-believers in this room, so it's difficult to approach this kind of topic without strawmanning somebody else's argument. But I know that plenty of people will say that it's metaphorical. And regardless of whether or not somebody is using good reasoning to get to the metaphorical conclusion, like you were saying that they might be wrong, find out that they're wrong, and then they change their approach. But either way, let's take this particular topic. So we have instances in the Bible that were predicted and didn't come true. So let's say we're talking to somebody who strongly believes that this is true, and they actually believe that this is metaphorical. So how do we have this conversation with somebody? Do you have an approach that you would use to instead of just like pointing out this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong? Like if you were in a room with somebody
because they get it wrong, or like why are they switching it around and saying, oh, now it's metaphorical just because Jesus got his words wrong?
Well, see, it could be. That could be the case. The problem is
that it would be metaphorical.
No, even if they use the reasoning, like even if it's subconscious, because they might not be aware that they're doing this mental gymnastics. A lot of times, cognitively, we are not aware of the biases that we put into the equation. So it might be the case that they changed their thought process, and they don't know that they are using poor reasoning. So in that case, I know we can say, yeah, but how did you shift your mind to that? But as someone who believed that, they might not be receptive to just pointing out that their reasoning was wrong. Is there a way that you could integrate this information in a way that might be more convincing to them, as if someone isn't aware of their thought process?
I mean, you can make excuses for anything. People make excuses for Warren Jeffs on why his prophecies didn't come true, and they rationalize it in their own way. He was predicting the end because he was in legal troubles in one town in Utah, and he needed everybody to move to get away from those. And then when the end didn't come, they just re-rationalized it. there's just a point when you're like, hey, the words that they say, that they're either true or not, according to Deuteronomy 18:20-22, they should be getting their words right if they really are coming in the name of God. Or just using a mustard seed of common sense would tell you that. Like, hey, I'm not going to believe Warren Jeffs. I'm not going to believe David Koresh was God. They didn't get their words right. Now, if they did, then sure, like that's something to definitely consider. Like if I told you that the sun was going to rise in the west tomorrow and set in the east, and it doesn't do that, you're probably going to call me a con man. But on the other hand, if it does do that, you know, you might call me God. But when it doesn't, I could come around and say, well, you know, the sun did come up, so it's a partial prophecy, or, oh, it's a spiritual meaning to it. Like there's always a way to rework words, but there's only, like a real God just gets their words right, just as Deuteronomy 18:20-22 says, or just a mustard seed of common sense. So I don't.
Yeah,
I
totally get the like argument strategy of someone claims that they have this whole big worldview that's true, and it being true and correct is like part of the worldview. So when they say like, oh, I'm always right, like if someone makes the claim, I am always right, you only have to find one little thing, like they get some, you know, the square root of a number or something wrong. And then if that was to then happen, then that proves that they're not always right. And then the whole worldview is wrong and they're garbage. You can disregard them. But I think that that's a very like, it's a certain way of thinking. It's definitely how my brain tends to work naturally.
Yeah,
like, I see things as like,
does either.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's like an engineering way of thinking or something, but like, I'm sure everyone thinks in all kinds of different ways, but definitely how my brain works would be that now their original claim is wrong, so I can just disregard it and then I can, you know, whatever, move on. But I think a lot of people don't think like that. And especially when they're emotionally invested in something which is more than just a claim. Yeah, if it's more than just a claim, if you know, you make a claim like I'm always right and then you're wrong and then like, oh, who cares? But if it's like your upbringing and your community and all of this kind of stuff, I guess when I approach people like this, sorry, I didn't mean to keep cutting you off. I'll just say my little thought here and then go back to what you're going to say. I guess that how I look at when I approach people like this, what I'm more interested in is getting some kind of practical progress towards them not causing issues. Like there are some people who believe, oh, God said when he made this prediction and he was wrong, that was a metaphor, but I know for sure that when he says this, he means all gay people are bad. And then so maybe I can make some practical progress with this person by saying,
right, isn't that a metaphor? Or couldn't you
so exactly, I'd say, well, how do you know which bits are metaphors? Yeah, which bits are metaphors and which bits are literal? Because someone else over here,
whatever they decide on their bias is what it ends up being.
Yeah,
it's just, hey, my bias narrative is what determines whether I'm going to go after gays or if I'm going to go after adulterers or not go after adulterers. You know, like they seem to today, where they're like, hey, Jesus plainly says what adultery is. They don't go after the adulterers, but they'll certainly go after homosexuals for it. You know, the power and authority of God.
And something here that is important is that, sure, we can point out flaws in the scripture, but oftentimes that's not the point that's holding them to the belief. So it's very easy for somebody to say, oh yeah, well, it's just a metaphor, or yeah, well, that part doesn't matter, but this other one does, because at least like you poked a hole in one thing, but that might not be the thing that's holding them to the belief. So I think it's worth kind of investigating each person that you're talking to. And sure, if that's the point that's holding them there, absolutely go down that road and talk to them more about that. But if you're finding that they're jumping around to different points, that might not be a keystone of their belief. So maybe shift gears a little bit and see what's
street. And I do encounter people that jump around a lot. I evangelize that on the street. I have a shirt that says Jesus lies on it and then lists the verses of it. And I go out and teach people about how Jesus lied. And I just use the Bible. I just use the words of God and the words of Jesus Christ. And, you know, that are supposed to have the power and authority. So I'm just relying on the word of God. And I teach them. A lot of Christians don't read their Bibles, and I hope atheists learn this because you should be learning the Bible, especially since they're trying to legislate the stuff over us. because you need to stand up against these people. They are getting more extreme. And, you know, if you use Jesus' own words that are right there in the Bible that have power and authority, like, there's no way to escape it. Like, they can make as many excuses they want. Like, one of the excuses they'll make is down on Matthew 24, 36. It says, no one knows the hour of the day but the angels in heaven. But, I mean, this is a common thing that we even use today in our own lingo. We would say, I don't know the minute or the second something's going to happen. And they used, you know, sundials back in the day, and that gave you an hour. And if you didn't know what the sundial read, or you didn't have a sundial, then you go by the days, similar to us using a minute or a second. That is more of an interpretation, I guess, there. But he goes off to talk about Noah and how it's going to be the same in Noah's day, which Noah didn't know the time or hour that God was going to judge the earth back in his story. So, I mean, there's a lot of parallels that match with it.
I think it is important to be aware politically of Christians coming in with the stuff and be educated and know where they're going with it and what they're trying to do, you know, especially in the US, where you've got sort of rising Christian fascism as like a political ideology.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm would add is that being educated and stuff and fighting back is good, but certainly don't think that if you're like going to go and knock over one support, like, here's a contradiction in the Bible, fascism defeated, because they do not give a fuck. Like, you see, I mean, you just saw them all voting for Trump, and you just saw them all celebrating him. Like, some of them were saying it. Yeah, he was just saying, like, some of them were saying that, like, Trump is like the new Jesus and all kinds of things, all kinds of plainly heretical by Christian standards stuff. Yep. Yeah. And he was, you know, he's an adulterer and he's a liar and he's a racist. And there's loads of things in the Bible that technically Jesus condemned. Yeah. And Trump's all of them. And it doesn't matter because
Jesus lied too, so.
Well, yeah. But the point is that you need to be aware that rather than sometimes, and I'm not criticizing you at all here, by the way. I think, you know, it's good that you're going and challenging people and understanding what's going on. I guess I'm criticizing my own actions in the past where I thought, oh, well, all I need to do is show that someone's worldview is logically inconsistent and then I win. But people don't really care about that. Not these like fascist nationalist types.
No, you don't.
What they care about is,
at least what I find.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question to you.
Proselytizing with a lot of people that don't know this stuff and just exposing them to words that they don't even read or people that are like on the fence. There's people
so my question
that have doubts. Yeah.
And my question to you then is, because you can obviously approach this from multiple different angles, but is your primary goal to knock down certain pegs and trap somebody in a corner, or is your goal to persuade somebody to change their viewpoint? Because I think it's fine to knock down pegs, and I think that there's a lot of people that are influenced by that, but some people can get very more defensive and more retreating into their beliefs when that happens. So I would exercise some caution and maybe for certain people using more of a gentle approach of getting at the core of their issue. But this is a great conversation, and I think that there's more that we can discuss about this in future weeks, but we do have other callers on the line, and I want to give some other people an opportunity. So it was great chatting with you. I hope you'll call in.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. It's been great talking to you guys. And just remember, Jesus lied. He's a fraud, and it's a biblical fact.
Stay safe with walking around with that T-shirt, because I know some places in the US that's a dangerous game. So stay safe.
Yeah. All right. That was a pretty interesting call, but we have some more announcements while we're waiting for the next one. If you shop on Amazon, then you can support the ACA at no cost to you. Simply visit tiny.cc/Amazon Smile ACA and designate the Atheist Community of Austin as your selected charity, and Amazon will donate a portion of their profit directly to the ACA. Katie, do you like merch?
I am currently wearing some merch. I'm a merch person. I either wear merch or nice dresses.
Well, if you like merch, and I know a lot of people in the audience like merch, the Talk Heathen merch store is back. Visit tiny.cc/merch ACA to get your favorite items like t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and check out our brand new items like beanies, cell phone cases, and tote bags. And now we even feature a limited edition item each month. Be sure to check that out on the store and all the other stores of the ACA shows. We also have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcast. And also, you can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. So, we have some other callers on the line, Katie.
Yeah.
And there's one that I was particularly interested in. I know that Katie and I are both trans people, and I think we want to talk about that a little bit today. We're trans? Are we trans? I forgot about that. So we have
let's do it. Take them on.
Eli-VA in Virginia. Sounds like you want to talk about the brains of trans people. What is your question or comment for us today?
Yeah, hi. How are y'all doing today?
Good,
doing
thanks.
Right.
How are you? How can we help?
Sorry, you're not supposed to say here. I don't know say that, but so yeah, I guess my question would be, so I know that there are some cultural aspects when it comes to trans individuals across the world, and I guess like there's like here in the U.S. Sorry, let me start over. So my question has to do with neurology, I guess, and trans individuals. I had read and I'd heard that there is a link between the brain chemistry of trans people and their affirmed gender, how it matches that rather than that of their gender assigned at birth, I guess. And I was wondering how that would translate into certain cultures that don't quite hold strict views on gender as we do here in the U.S.
Right. I think this is really interesting discussion topic, and one of the most annoying things about it is the word gender, and it's because the word gender has so many different meanings. Often when you're in like a sort of a radical feminist space or like coming in from more of a feminist angle, you might hear people describe gender as like all of the stuff that we made up, like women wear dresses, men wear trousers, that kind of stuff, and also like a form of oppression in that women are held back from doing certain jobs and men have to go and do other certain jobs and all this kind of stuff, and you'd hear people say that as gender. And that can include like stereotypes about people, but also it can include like enforced roles inside a family or inside society. But then also we have this kind of term gender identity, which is when you hear trans people talking about it, they're not talking about this kind of thing that we made up that like is some kind of cultural understanding or enforced by people, but they're more talking about some part of their brain or person in a similar way to like sexual orientation or handedness are, like some part of you that develops over time. And of course, what makes this extra difficult is we don't quite know to what extent differences in behavior between men and women typically on like a population scale are down towards like societal traditions and pressures and roles, and how much of it is like innate as a word for it, so like the kind of nature versus nurture argument. But what we can say is that trans people do have some kind of nature part to it, and it's like largely nature, and there's quite a lot of things we can point to see that. Like we do have the brain scans thing that you were mentioning. It is slightly more complicated than like brains on. There isn't just like a man brain and a woman brain. Like that's kind of nonsense to even suggest it's like that. Not calling you out anything, but there are like the brain is the most complicated organ in your body, and there are so many different structures and chemistry and all kinds of different things going on. And some of it has some kind of sexual dimorphism, which means there is some kind of difference typically between men and women, but not in all individual cases and to different degrees. And for some parts of the brain, you will find that trans women are much more like cis women. And for some of them, you will find that trans men are more like cis men, but it's not necessarily all the parts. And there are some parts of the brain which are different in all trans people than for all cis people. So it's kind of complicated, and you couldn't like scan a brain and say, this is a trans person for sure, this is a woman for sure. That's not something we have the ability to, and potentially we never will. But so like when we're talking about trans people, that is one of the things we can say, well, trans people do exist because we've got there's some kind of differences typically that with some level of confidence. But there's also other things too, like we know that conversion therapy doesn't work. Like if someone is trans, even if you try and torture them, it doesn't make it go away. We know that in identical twins, even if they're separated at birth, if one of them is trans, the other one is also more likely to be trans, which we wouldn't expect if it was totally social. And there's a few other things too. But then combining into your sort of question about gender roles in societies, like there's been some form of trans people in almost every culture. I mean, every culture, as far as I'm aware, in sort of throughout human history, whether they're documented as someone who changes from one like box to another, or whether they're like often put into a third or even fourth box. In some cultures, you have like, for example, in India, they have Hijra, I think it's how it's pronounced, or similar to that, which traditionally has been like a third gender, and they have their own kind of role in society and different beliefs about them, and they're seen as separate from men and women, whereas in perhaps the West, we might consider them to be trans women, and they may or may not consider themselves to be that. And so we've got this kind of lens to look through of cultures. But what you were asking about whether we would see, I know in the notes, you've in the show, call screen notes, we've got something like, does that make sense in cultures that don't care as much about gender stereotyping? And I think... Oh yeah, sorry Ben, I'm ranting off.
I like to jump in too, because biologically this is an interesting conversation, and I mean the more recent data is showing, like Katie was mentioning, that the overlap between male brains and female brains is so tight that there's very few differences at all between a male brain and a female brain. So thinking about that as well, there are other factors in biology that influence neuroanatomy and neurobiology. So even when we're looking at this, let's say we found a difference on a PET scan that's showing functionality of certain regions at a certain period of time. What other variables are contributing to the brain functioning in a certain way due to certain stimuli? You have hormone influences from the rest of the body, things like epinephrine, norepinephrine, things like testosterone, estrogen, cortisol are going to still have impacts on the way you process information at a certain period of time. So is this difference related solely to neuroanatomy, or are there other biological factors playing into account as well? But
and
even so,
can change your brain. Even, I mean, you learn things, don't you? It changes how your brain works. So
absolutely. So I think we need to be very careful with saying that the brain is essentially assigning you to male or female, whether you're trans or cis, because I think we get into a danger of pigeonholing people into, well, you meet the brain criteria to be a woman, so you get to transition and this other person doesn't. So it's, in fact, like it puts us in a weird spot for, like you were saying, the people that seem to be overlapping more categories, because these categories are assigned by humans. These are made up categories. Biology is very fluid, and people fit on different areas based on a number of different factors. So
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I was just kind of agreeing with what you're saying, and how like science does its best to describe the observations of the world around us, not necessarily being a sort of like end all be all. This is what this is, and of course, like my question, not meaning to like discredit or like invalidate the experiences of like non-binary people, or like any sort of like each individual's own experience. I guess more of it was kind of more on like the social, cultural aspect of it, and like how like the neuroscience and biological aspect sort of would translate into, because like a little bit more like specific context, I do have like a friend that is from the Philippines, and I was having a conversation about pronouns and gender identity and stuff, and they were talking about how like in the Philippines it's not quite as big of a concern or a topic. There are some people who you know they identify a little differently, or they don't give a lot more concern to it. Because I actually asked that person, I was like, I just want to be respectful. Like, what are your pronouns? And they were just like, I don't really care. I mean, they do present a little bit more of a like a feminine, female. Like I noticed on Facebook that, you know, she uses she, her pronouns. And I was like, but I've also heard some other people refer to her as he, him, or like they, them pronouns. So I was like, I want to, you know, I just want to make sure that I am like accurately presenting you, you know, as best as I can. So I guess that kind of like sparked that whole thought process in my head. And of course, who better to talk to than two of you?
Yeah, it is interesting seeing what people think when they're from other cultures. Philippines has its kind of own interesting relationship with trans people. I don't really know if I know enough about it to authoritatively say, but they do have a cultural recognition of some form of trans people, and have done for a while in their kind of like traditional culture, in a very different way to lots of sort of countries that were colonized by Christianity more early on, which is interesting, and it changes how people see things. I guess one thing I just was going to say on cultures that have stronger and weaker gender stereotypes, when you have a lot of pressure for people to fit into boxes, if you either have some kind of really horrible totalitarian, you know, dictator or something, or maybe if you have a really strong religious social force or something, you often see a lot less openly out LGBT people, because it's dangerous for them, either a threat of attack or a threat of being shunned from society and not being able to sort of get by. That doesn't mean that there are less LGBT people necessarily. It means that they're having to pretend to be something else to fit into society. But generally, we see that the more strong the rules are for this kind of stuff, usually coincides with patriarchal rules. Like usually you see like fascists usually like having a really strong patriarchy kind of system, and religions usually like them. And usually the stronger those kind of patriarchal forces are, the stronger the gender stereotypes are. Men do this, women do this. And in those societies, you usually see less openly out trans people. It's harder to transition. Transition's not even possible. And usually the more lax gender stereotypes are, the less pressures there are, the more trans people come out and are able to be free. And I think if there's often a common argument you will see from anti-trans people, that trans people are just like stereotypes. They're just like gender stereotypes. And there's the reason that's wrong for a lot of reasons. You know, you get trans people who don't conform to gender stereotypes even for the like gender they're transitioning into, and all that kind of stuff. But also it just doesn't correlate in the world. If we just look at all the different cultures in the world at the moment, generally the more patriarchal strong gender stereotypes we have, the less trans people there are out. So yeah, it's definitely a factor in it, but it's kind of the opposite way to what you would expect if gender identity was just some social force that were created. I think that alone should be enough to make people realize that lots of these anti-trans things are just total garbage.
Does that answer your question? Yeah, I think we're going to have to move on because we've got some more callers on the line, but this was great. And again, if you want to talk about this more, you can always call in the next time that both of us are on, and we'd love to talk to you more about it.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye. Man, I could rant off on this forever.
I know,
feel like I needed 1% of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's such an intense topic. But after this show, make sure that you are checking out the newest episode of the flagship show of the ACA, The Nonprofits, which will air live at 3 p.m. Central Time today at tiny.cc/YTNP. The ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, we've got an updated website. Head to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what you liked, what you thought was effective, and more importantly, what you thought we could do better. Email us at tv@atheist-community.org and let us know. The ACA hosts several other shows other than Talk Heathen, including the nonprofits, Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, and the Atheist Experience. If you didn't catch all of the shows last week, here's a taste of the things you probably want to go back and watch.
So, and in that moment, I was so disillusioned. I was just like, you can never have faith in other human beings, you know?
You're born alone, you die alone. I hear it.
Oh, yeah.
I had a breakup in my 20s. I understand what that feels like.
So in order to pass your exams, you have to study Quran anyway and memorize parts of it, regardless of your own personal faith.
So no such thing as a separation of religion and government in Egypt, hey?
Hey, did you hear Pope Francis? He said affirming things about the queer community. My thoughts are just, well, congratulations. Like thanks for finally getting there.
You could convert tens of thousands of people right now. Ask God, your intelligent designer God to give you the magic words to convince us that God exists. And you'll get straight ticket, 72 virgins. You're ready to go. Give it. What do you got?
That's not love. That's manipulation. It's fear-mongering. It's vile. It's disgusting. And the book that you're pointing to advocates for slavery, genocide, misogyny, all of these things. And you come up, well, it's just love. It's just context. Go yourself. Bastards. These people, I tried to be as supportive as I could for them. And now Johnny and Ben, who hosted Talk Heathen earlier today. So if you haven't seen it, I was going to say go watch it. We were being kind. And these guys, they just walked in with pizza and eye patches. You know what? You too.
So another very important and exciting announcement is that on September 25th, if you are in Austin, consider making plans to join us in the studio audience at the ACA Free Thought Library for the live broadcast of Talk Heathen at 1 p.m. with Objectively Dan and a surprise guest, and the Atheist Experience with Matt Delahunty and Andrew Steidel at 4:30 p.m. Doors open at noon, and parking is wherever you can find a legal spot after the lot is full. And if you can't make it there this month, we'll continue to broadcast from the library the last Sunday of every month. So keep watching the show and our website, atheist-community.org, for news and information as we expand our in-studio offerings in the near future. I was at the library this past time that we did this in the studio, and it was amazing. It was a great time. I got to meet lots of people. We also had the Bat Cruise that weekend. So in the future, the next time we have the Bat Cruise and live
Bat Cruise.
audience.
Bat Cruise. I thought you were saying
so
Bat Cruise, as in like, the crew behind the show. And I was like, wait, they're all bats or what?
They're all bats. Every single one of our crew are bats.
When we go to crew cam later, we're going to just have a whole room full of bats. It's going to be amazing.
All right. You ready to take some calls? I saw that we have some theists on the line.
Let's do it. Well, we've got loads. Flipping heck. All right.
Yeah. Well, there's one that specifically responded to the poll from the chat, so I want to get them on. Rick, him from Canada, says, I think that there's reasonable proof for an afterlife. Did we talk last week? Is this the same Rick that I talked to last week?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same one. It's the same one. So,
okay.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. I know last week I was a little aggressive, Ben, and I want to apologize. You seem like a good guy, so I do apologize for that. It's just passion, so I'm not going to promise I won't do it again. But
I got you. What's your evidence of the afterlife?
Yeah, well, I'm
so
excited.
Curious.
I hope there is an afterlife. So.
Yeah, so I just wanted to see how you guys can rectify the similarities between what the Bible describes as God and what we know as energy. So, like, for instance, the body has energy, and when the body dies, the energy leaves your body, right?
So hold on. Can you define energy? Because
what do you mean by
think
energy?
That Katy knows a lot about engineering, and you know, I took physics, and I think our definition of energy might be a little bit different. So how do you define energy?
Yeah, what do you mean energy?
So energy comes in lots of different forms. Pretty much everything has energy in it, and energy is all around us, right? So just plain natural energy that just exists, right? So it's in our air, it's in everything. So not necessarily anything that's in the mechanics of anything, right? But energy comes in many different forms. But in its natural state, like the Big Bang, for instance, right? In the origin story, as far as science knows, the only thing that was for certain in the beginning was energy, right?
I guess if we is God energy, is that what you're saying that the similarity
that's
is, or are you saying?
Yeah. So if we so the Bible says that God breathed His life into us, right? And we know that energy is a requirement for life, right? It keeps us going. It's in our organs, right? It's in the neurons. In our
do you think that is energy a thing? Is it something that can act on something else? Because I think my definition of energy is the capacity to do work. So things have energy because they have they're able to make something happen. So is this energy? I feel like there's a slight disconnect in when we're saying that everything has energy and there's this energy that's just innately present. Like, is this a thing? Is this a tangible thing? What, like, can you narrow this down a little bit?
Yeah, so there is energy that is in everything, right? Energy just exists. That's the whole point. Energy doesn't start, it doesn't stop. Therefore, it's eternal, right? In the beginning, there was energy.
What is it?
Rather than I guess asking what energy is kind of a good question, but I guess in physics you have this kind of concept of energy in that when you have like some chemicals and you mix them together, they turn into light and heat, and that's like a transfer of energy from one state to another state. Not to like guess your argument or to try and strawman you or anything, Rick, but are you basically going to argue that because energy is always like energy's in one state in me now, and then maybe I'll get cremated or whatever, and I burn up and I turn into light and I turn into heat, and then I'll, all these other things. Are you just saying that because the energy still exists, that is like a form of afterlife? Is that where you're going? Because I might have a counter to that if you're about to argue that. I was just preempting.
Yeah, I'm basically saying in the beginning was energy, right? Energy is in all of us. Energy is all around us. Like the Bible says, God is everywhere, right? God breathed into us Himself, which is energy. Energy is eternal as far as science knows. It didn't end. It doesn't end. It doesn't begin. And it was the only thing that was in the beginning that supposedly created the Big Bang. So when we die, our energy leaves our body. So my argument is, how do you differentiate between that energy being a divine creator, as the Bible connects it to what we know as energy, or energy just existing always, never ending, driving force of life, and in the beginning was only energy? How can you not
to answer that?
My argument.
To answer that question, literally, how do I know whether energy has always existed or whether it was created by a divine creator? I don't know. I'm not convinced either way. Maybe the Big Bang is a natural process that happens always, and maybe there's loads of them or something, or maybe there is some kind of God which created all energy potentially. I don't know, and I don't have any evidence for any of those hypotheses. So I'm just going to say I'm not convinced about anyone claiming that it's any of them. But in terms of whether there's an afterlife, I feel that's like a separate claim.
Yeah, so can I ask you this? Doesn't it concern you as an atheist that energy is eternal as we know it? It's the driving force of all life. The Bible connects God to it being invisible, being everywhere, being in the beginning. All that was made, without Him was nothing made, just like with energy existed. Without it, nothing would exist. Doesn't that?
So here's a problem.
As an atheist?
I don't understand why it would concern me.
Here's a problem, Rick. So this energy, for one, is very nebulous in the way you're using it. But regardless of whether or not energy has been around this whole time, which, I mean, we do say that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just is. But the thing is, just because that energy exists does not mean that I'm going to be conscious. You can have energy and not have consciousness and not be alive. Like if you put a rock or a ball on top of a hill, you're going to have some potential energy. And then when you push it, it's going to have some kinetic energy. That rock or that ball is not conscious. It's not aware of anything. It's not alive, but it has energy.
And some of that energy could have previously been part of a conscious body. Like if I am a human and I get cremated and then I'm turned into like a ball of dust, and then you put the ball on top of a wall or something, maybe we're saying my energy is now like in this potential energy in the ball. But what happens if they make me into a biscuit and then eat me, and then I becomes part, like Ben eats me, and then my energy becomes part of Ben. So now we're like the same person. And then when Ben dies and he gets made into a biscuit, and then like, you know, the rest of the ACA team eat that, like, are we compounding into one person? Or what happens if they like split the biscuit? Like, I feel like when we have this kind of idea that I have a load of energy, and then when all my energy goes elsewhere, that's me still being alive. I mean, I'm going to go and be part of a load of other things on Earth, and maybe a small amount of my energy will leave the Earth or whatever. But like, eventually it would have mixed with loads of life. Like loads of the energy that's in me has probably been in other life forms. Are they still alive inside me? Am I the afterlife of like a stegosaurus? Do you see where I'm going with this?
Well, when you're,
it's a stegosaurus.
Yeah, so when you're cremated, say you were cooked into a biscuit, right? The energy has already left your body at that point. Your soul energy has left, and now new energy is.
Okay,
this is a new claim. This is a new claim.
This is why we were asking about energy, because I don't believe in souls. I don't think that this is different to my belief about God. So I'm not convinced either way that whether there's a God or there's not a God. I don't know. I'm convinced there's not the Christian God, but I don't know about other gods. But I'm pretty confident there is no such thing as a soul. And if there is energy, we can measure energy. Like we can burn something and see how much like kilojoules are stored inside it, or we can, you know, measure how bright something is or how loud something is, and that's detecting the energy in it. How could we measure a soul? Like how can we even detect a soul? What is it?
Well, it's the energy is a theory. But to go to Ben's point before about the consciousness, if the energy through the electrons, or you would probably know better as a biologist, are in control through our neurons, right? Technically, you can't argue that energy has nothing to do with our consciousness if the neurons.
Oh, it does.
Okay, hold on, you're mixing up my words. So I did not necessarily say that that energy has nothing to do with the consciousness, because there's of course energy at play, but energy is not
required.
They are not synonymous. Energy and consciousness are not synonymous. And I think that there's a bit of an equivocation fallacy happening here, saying that, well, everything has energy, and then using that to say, well, your soul has to go someplace. Like that's using the equation for energy being constant, and then assuming that that's the same equation for a soul being transferred to an afterlife. They're not the same argument here.
Also, if we're using the energy can't be created and energy can't be destroyed, if we're using the claim energy can't be created or can't be destroyed, and we just accept that souls are energy and souls exist, and then therefore when someone dies, the soul has to go somewhere. Where's the soul come from? Like new humans are born every single second. Like, it does a birth create an energy? Does we're creating energy there, and then I think we've invalidated the whole argument, haven't we?
That's the point, is God breathed his spirit into us, right? So our spirit, I'm connecting it as a soul. I don't expect you guys to use the same terminology, obviously, but I'm connecting it because the connection between what energy is as we know it and the Bible's description of God, the two seem pretty ironically synonymous, right? That's why I'm trying to make the point that
if we have this law, we can't create or destroy energy. Let's just accept that that's a law, right? If we have that, and then you say, oh, well, we've got these souls that are energy, and then, but we are creating new ones. So I'll be like, well, why, if souls can be created and they don't fit like half of this law, why would they fit the other half? It just seems like this is just totally unrelated, and you just kind of want to say souls exist forever. and that's like a claim that people always say about souls. And my answer to that would be, what is a soul? How do you detect it? How do you prove it? What does it contain? Then it's kind of nothing to do with thermodynamics, is it?
Yeah, well, my argument is just that there's two things in this world that we know for sure are eternal, that we say are eternal. One is energy and one is God. And it's ironic that energy is described as God in the Bible so closely to each other. And God's breathed himself, which is his spirit, which is energy, into us. We know energy leaves the body when we die, the energy that's with us our whole lives. And that's the point, right? Is those are ironically similar, and I just don't know how you guys can honestly.
Yeah, you know how I get around that? Number one is I don't believe in your Bible, so I don't see why I need to take the Bible's word for what a soul is and what energy is. I know what energy is based on study and repetition and experimentation that people have done before. They can demonstrate what this energy is and how it transfers. But I have no reason to believe that the Bible's definition of energy is legitimate. I have no reason to. Why should I? Why should I care about what the Bible says?
Sure, no, that's fair. But can you at least agree to this? In the beginning, energy created the heavens and the earth was without form, void, and darkness upon the face of the deep, and the energy moved. That's the point. Is energy is the only thing that's eternal aside from God. So you can say you don't believe in my Bible, but you can't deny the fact that we know one thing in this universe is eternal, and it shares eerily similarities to the God of the Bible. I'm not asking.
But it doesn't share any similarities because energy can't create souls. You've just told me one thing about God is that he can create energy. I mean, you've just told me one thing about energy. It's that he can't create energy. But if God is energy, and when someone's born,
his spirit.
So God is energy, and you cannot create or destroy energy, and souls are energy. And when someone is born, they get a new soul. Someone is creating energy. That's like a conflict here, unless God is giving a piece of his energy, in which case he's getting smaller every time someone's born, or less energetic.
Well, perhaps God is creating energy, or perhaps energy is reincarnated, right? Who knows? Maybe the energy floats around until it finds a new soul. We don't really know exactly
That's
how.
the answer. We don't know, but we know that if Christianity is true, reincarnation isn't the thing, because it says it isn't.
Yes, it is. Elijah was reincarnated. John the Baptist was Elijah. Jesus says that. And predicted that Elijah needed to come before Christ.
Jesus was brought back to dead or whatever. But when you said reincarnation, I thought you meant like coming back as a frog or whatever, which probably is not on my list of animals I want to be. But what I'm saying here is that the total number of souls is increasing if souls are real. Like that's true. I mean, 10% of all the humans who have ever lived are alive today, or whatever the percentage is. Like the amount of people is massively, drastically increasing. In Jesus's time, like there probably weren't even 1 billion people on the earth. I don't know the numbers now, and there's like 8 billion now. So there's obviously more souls, and that energy has to come from somewhere if it can't be created or destroyed. And if God is energy, and God has always existed, Do you see where this contradiction that I'm trying to talk about is? I know I keep going back to it.
I do see, but I mean, I do see what you're saying, but there's energy in everything, right? And if you look at the Old Testament, even when they sacrificed all those animals, they all had spirits, right? And Jesus came and stopped that. Perhaps our spirits all started there. You know what I mean? There must be a reason why they killed those animals, right?
How do we know that they had spirits? What's your evidence for a spirit?
Because they have energy. Every living thing has energy. Everything has energy. Every time you move your hand, you're touching energy.
This is the same thing we talked about last time. So this is the same kind of thing we talked about last time with the rib argument. So we're going once again in this little circle of it has a soul because it has energy, and then you're using one thing to justify the next thing, and then going back and keep using the same things to justify each other. And do you have anything besides energy that proves that there's a spirit?
I mean, like I said before, I understand that you guys don't believe in the spirit, so I'm using that as a Christian. I connect it because God's spirit, right? So all I can say to that is that the spirit is eternal, energy is eternal, and it leaves the body once it dies. And so that's the spirit, as according to my religion, right? So that's, I mean, obviously to prove it is tough, right? We can use certain machines to kind of watch the heat and energy leave a body once it dies. So we know that it takes off, and we know it doesn't die. It continues on.
Wait, so are you saying that the heat leaving the body is evidence that the spirit has left? Because there's a fascinating thing, like with the human body utilizing ATP and producing ATP. The body has to make ATP for it then to use, and when you die, you stop being able to produce ATP, and there's a certain amount of time that goes by to where you're out of ATP and you can't make any more, and so of course you're not going to be able to generate heat because you have no ATP. So this isn't necessarily evidence that a soul is leaving. It's evidence that the body, the physical body, is not functioning.
Yeah,
I'm still interested in this energy claim.
But the energy creates the heat in the body, right? That's the point. Is it the energy flowing through your
energy
from body?
Ben, what's ATP?
ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and it is essentially it's a carrier molecule for energy in the body. So you transfer phosphates from ATP to other molecules, and this is what drives certain processes. So it's evidence of ATP, and that energy is that, again, capacity to do work. You are storing it's kind of like electrical energy almost in these molecules that you are releasing through breaking of this bond with the phosphate, and we know that this is how it works. So if you could connect the dots, then we have ATP. Does this then relate to the soul?
Yeah, well, I'd have to watch that back and watch some stuff on it to fully understand what you're saying. But I can say that as far as the energy that's in our neurons and is responsible for keeping our body alive, we go cold pretty quick because it's all
that's ATP.
Down. The energy leaves. The neurons stop processing, right? The heart stops processing with neurons and the electrical components, right? So
you can't die without your heart stopping.
The energy leaves, everything shuts down.
Yeah, your heart actually can beat on its own without the brain, and it's just because of ATP. So, again, we're going back to something that is physical. All of these processes are physical processes. So I don't see a need to add something spiritual to this process.
It's actually interesting because if someone does brain die, if you destroyed someone's brain like entirely, they're definitely dead. And that's surely that's the soul, the chance the soul leaves the body, like when they're absolutely definitely dead. But their heart would still be going, and that they're still alive in one sense, and they've still got loads of energy going on, and you might even be able to feed them in some way where they carried on growing, even using up, getting more energy. You could feed them a Ben biscuit.
Yeah, like this is why life support works. Like you can have somebody on life support and keep them alive even if their brain isn't working at all, because we have a machine that can breathe for them and can pump their heart for them. So and again, these are physical processes.
Perhaps the energy just doesn't leave the body until it's completely deceased. I mean, I don't know how it works.
What's completely deceased?
I think the argument in itself is pretty compelling.
I think that there's twice now you've said a really good thing that I like, Rich, which is where you said, I don't know. And I think that I don't know should be delivered in a lot more locations. Like, if you don't know what a soul is, or you can't define it, then perhaps we don't agree that it does or doesn't exist until we do know. And if you don't know what counts as alive or dead, then maybe we'll wait till we decide, until we find out what does, before we make any sort of proclamations on it. And if we don't really know what energy is, or whether God's energy, perhaps we should just say, I don't know. I think that's I like to say I don't know. It's a good intellectually consistent position to take.
That's fair. If you want to stick with I don't know, and that's the point. I'm not saying that I know definite that this is what it is, but if you look at the connections, right, and the fact that it's eternal, and the fact that it's in all of us, right, like the Bible describes, the fact that it's everywhere, that it's invisible, all these factors of energy that are connected to God, especially in the beginning, was energy, and that it's eternal.
It's not convinced.
Those two things alone.
So I think we've kind of reached an end point where we're not really going any farther. So I have some homework that I want you to do for me if you can, and feel free to call in later. But can you define energy or a soul without relying on something biblical or without relying on your own religious background. And if you can find some way to give us a definition that we can really work with, but then also look into physics and what do the laws of physics say about energy? How does energy transfer? If you have some background on that and then want to come back and talk more, I think we could maybe reach the next stage of this conversation. But I do think that we've had a productive time here today. So any final thought before I let you go?
No, that's good. I wrote it down. I'll definitely go check it out. Thanks for your time, guys. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Rick.
Have a good rest of your day.
I just want to say, I said I don't want to come back as a frog, and I feel like I regret saying that, because there's a type of frog, right, that when they have like sex, the females are really big and the males are really little, and they need to be there for when the females laying their eggs to do the like insemination. So the males have evolved this like glue that they secrete from their belly, and they jump on to the female and then stick to her so that they're there in place, so that when she's laying her eggs, no one else is going to get in. But it's like some of these frogs, they're not such good jumpers and they don't really know what's going on. They can't always tell which is a female frog, maybe which is a rock or which is a male frog. So you get these kind of situations where you have like a female frog with like 6 or 7 males like stacked up. Glue, and this glue lasts hours, so you're just fucked. But I think it'd be hilarious being a female frog jumping around with like this 7 male frog orgy tower going on behind you. Be like, check me out,
Things
mate.
that I didn't know I needed to learn about on a Sunday was, instead of going to church, my parents must be so proud of me. Instead of going to church, I'm spending my Sunday learning about frog sex and orgy towers with Katy Mongomerie on Talk Heathen.
So yeah, I think I'll come back as an orgy frog, please.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, for the people that have decided to support us on Patreon, we do read out the top 5 patrons of the week. Katie, would you like to read out the patrons today?
I would love to. That's probably the only reason I do this show anymore, I think. No, that and the frog facts. So yes, this week we have Eric Tweet, Dinglebury Jackson, Balaam's Donkey, the Bearded Skeptic of TikTok. Cool. I might do a TikTok. No, I've got a TikTok. I've started a TikTok. What am I saying? I might do some more TikToks. Davor Valjian. Sorry if I said your name wrong. Maybe it's Valian. And we have an honorary mention this week for Mystique Lady. Good name.
But I mean, in slight tangent, real quick. I know the Bearded Skeptic of TikTok, who's been on our list for a few weeks, is in medical school and just starting off in medical school. And I'm sorry. Anyway.
Basically, what Ben was about to say before chickening out is, fuck anyone who's ever been to medical school. I hate you. That's right. That's right, wasn't it, Ben? Yeah.
No, exactly. But we have plenty of theists on the lines right now, and I would love to get to this next one. So we have Hayley, pronouns are she, her, in Delaware, and it says, atheists are far more hateful than believers, and you can prove it. Would you like to tell us more about this?
For this one, let's go, Hayley.
Yes, absolutely. I'd say ever since its inception, since Christianity's inception, atheists have just had their knives out to just attack any theist they've seen. Since year one, when Jesus was born, they've just caused all sorts of discourse and rancor throughout the global community.
Okay. For example, and in comparison, so like you're saying that atheists are worse than Christians, but also all other religious people, or other religious people included?
I'd say Christianity would be the main focus of the hatred. It's just sort of been nonstop, I'd say.
And
May
when
I
you
ask
say
you a
hatred,
question?
oh, sorry, you go on, Ben.
Oh, have you heard of the Crusades?
The Crusades?
Yeah. Who started those?
Christians, but I mean that was then, this is now. That was like sort of our dirty.
Wait, what?
Well,
That was
hold
then.
on. Hold on. You said that you initially
said
started
since
off
year
saying
one.
that since the inception of Christianity that they've been the targets, and then you said, well, but that's the Crusades were then and this is now. So are we talking atheists have been worse for all time, or are we shifting now to just the modern day?
Was maybe during the Crusades the Christians were worse?
The modern day, I'd say, for the past 300 years, approximately.
300. So
Mm-hmm.
when did the slave trade end?
The slave trade ended around that time. I'd say they're sort of in a league of their own with that. With that,
But
in
there
that
was lots of
respect,
Christians doing
races
that, right?
aren't like. Mm-hmm.
I think
Wait, say
not
that
only
again?
was it Christians doing it, but like the Bible kind of condones it, and I think that's quite hateful. I guess we could carry on picking out examples of things that Christians have done that are horrible, but I guess how would you? I'm trying to work out what kind of claim you're actually making. You saying like if we measured the hate from all atheists and added it up, and then we measured the hate from all Christians and added it up, it would just be more from atheists. Because I mean, I don't really know how I'd measure that. Like, what's in your mind when you're saying that atheists are hateful? What's like the thing that's inspiring? Because if I said Christians are hateful, which I wouldn't necessarily make like such a sweeping claim, some Christians are hateful, and an example I might have in my mind would be like trying to take away minority rights in the USA at the moment. Like that, I feel that's driven by hate. You know, trying to stop gay people from being able to be married, trying to stop women from having abortions, trying to stop trans people from having healthcare. Like that in my mind is driven by hate, and that's one of the most sort of hateful things that affects me day to day. And so you must have something in your mind where you think, oh, atheists are so hateful. Maybe you're not spending so much time thinking about feminism and LGBT rights, but maybe you're thinking of something like, oh, that thing that those atheists do. So like what's the thing that's sort of driving you to make this claim?
I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. Ever since I was a kid, atheists have been extremely loud and incredibly close. And a lot of people in my life have had similar experiences, but the theists that I've been around, my father especially, have been a lot less maleficent, and they've just generally had that pursuit of happiness to keep them going, if that makes sense.
So I can totally believe that you might have been in a situation where the atheists that you've interacted with were just not nice people, or were in a sort of situation of conflict with you or something where there's a misunderstanding between your two belief sets, and there's some kind of disagreement where you come away feeling they're horrible people. But do you think that necessarily means that's true for all atheists, or like have you encountered enough atheists to know? I guess like if it's kind of like a feeling, do you see why it might be a bit kind of presumptuous to assume all atheists are horrible?
I believe so. I just think atheists act like they're the nice guys. They're like a bit rocky with their beliefs. Their beliefs are not ironclad, and they act like they know it all, but they don't. And I think that rubs off
That's
a lot
interesting though.
on other people.
So I agree with you that some atheists might act like the good guys, and some atheists are not the good guys. Some atheists are absolute dickheads, like hard agree on that, but some aren't. And I know some really lovely atheists, and it's the same with religious people, really. But one thing you said there, they feel like they know it all. I think it's the exact opposite. I think religious people claim to know it all. They know how the universe started. They know where we're going when we die. They know what's objectively morally true. They're all things that religious people claim. And generally, most atheists I know will say, I don't know any of that. I don't know if there's a God. I don't know where the universe came from. I don't know what happens after we die. I don't know what is necessarily morally better than something else. Maybe that's a bit of a deflection from your point, but I know there's this kind of stereotype of like the smug atheist, and maybe I'm not the best person to dispel that, but it's certainly a stereotype that isn't universally true. Like Ben's really nice, generally.
See, I'm the nice trans person on the show.
Yeah, the nice atheist. We have one token nice atheist on this show.
The token nice atheist. But I wonder, going back to your story, and definitely our thoughts and beliefs are formed largely by our own experiences, and I can see why this would be meaningful for you. But I want to ask, because it's very easy to draw conclusions from patterns that we perceive to be there, but our brains are really good at fixating on certain variables and disregarding other ones. So let's say if I wanted to test between people that like Pepsi and people who like Coke, and I said that people who like Pepsi are nicer than people who like Coke. And I know this because the people, I grabbed two groups of people, and this group over here, they all love Pepsi, and they just happen to be, I didn't ask them about their community service or their value systems. I didn't ask them any of that. The only variable I cared about was their preference. And so, of course, if I gathered a whole bunch of Pepsi fans that happen to all like volunteer at animal shelters on the weekend and, volunteer at orphanages and all that stuff, and then I get people that like Coke, and then these are people that are out kicking the puppies at the shelters, and like, so I could bias my sample very easily and skew the data to where, all of these people that liked Pepsi were nicer than the people that liked Coke, but it might not be because of that preference. It's because of the other variables that I didn't account for. So this is what happens in regular life. We don't control for who's around us. We're around the people that we're around. And you might have trends in people who all like to kick puppies, and they just might be the group that you're in. But that isn't reflective of their other beliefs necessarily. So is that potentially, and I know that's kind of a silly example, but is it possible that these people may not have been the nicest people and they just happen to be atheist? Or do you think that it's their atheism that made them to be less kind?
I think it's the atheism that made them less kind, because whenever I meet an atheist, I tell them, don't be a menace, you can repent, but they don't listen. And I try to explain to them my reasoning for my belief in God. I tell them that truth is stranger than fiction, but they just want to live in Sin City. It's unbelievable.
Hayley, have you ever, I don't know, I'll go for it. You must have had a situation, or I know a lot of women have had the situation, I've certainly had it, where a man has come up and just, for no reason, accused me of being like emotional, like, oh, calm down, love. And I'm like, I wasn't annoyed here. I wasn't upset. I was just like, oh no, what you said here is wrong or something. And they're like, oh, calm down, you're so emotional. Have you ever had that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating, and it can make you, it can be one of this like kind of self-fulfilling prophecy thing where you weren't angry, but now you are because someone's being sexist, and you know they're being sexist because they wouldn't have said that to a man, and they're just saying it to like throw you off. I feel like a little bit like if you walk up to an atheist and you're like, don't be a menace, kind of puts you in a similar situation. Maybe not quite the same because the power dynamic may or may not be the same, but like if someone came up to me and they're like, oh, Katy, you're an atheist, like, don't be a menace. Like you can stop sinning. You can stop living a wicked life. I'd be like, hang on a minute, mate. What are you talking about? I'm not a menace. I think I'm a nice person, and now I feel like you're kind of coming at me, and now maybe I do feel like I want to be horrible to you because I feel like you've been horrible to me. So I think that might be a feeling that lots of people get. And do you see how that might be slightly similar, those two situations? Do you agree?
I'd say so. I think a lot of my disbelief and hatred for the atheist cause stems from one particular person I knew. He just made me feel like I was the enemy of the state, you know, and his words were like a lethal weapon to me and just made me emotionally, just nonstop emotional torment.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I can, you know, I don't even, you know, I just totally believe you. There are some people who are horrible, but certainly there are some atheists who are horrible. And there are some atheists who feel like they need to destroy religious people in some way to upset them or to take them down or whatever. That is a thing. Certainly on the internet, you know, you get these people in comment sections, and you do get religious people doing it too. And if you're religious, you're more likely to see the atheists because they're gonna, you know, you're saying something religious and they're gonna come and disagree with you. Whereas a religious person who might be horrible might just be like, oh, Hayley's just religious like me, then that's cool. And they'll go and be horrible to an atheist instead. So you end up kind of seeing this like one-sided thing. I guess you could maybe, you know, if you live in a situation where everyone around you is a Christian and then you meet this atheist and they come in and arguing with you and they're saying all this horrible stuff, you might be like, oh, this is what atheists are like. But if you kind of zoom out a bit, sometimes you see this same pattern in other things, like in politics and even in like sports teams where people see each other and they're kind of like of a different tribe or group or whatever the word you want to use, and they've kind of got this like underlying presumption that there's going to be conflict, and that alone itself can put everyone on the back foot where they're not going to be ready to just be nice to each other. But I guess one other thing that I would add is that in some places, not the UK, but I know in some places in the US, if you're an atheist, you can face a lot of discrimination from religious people. You know, people, you might not be able to have, you might lose your job if you came out as an atheist, or your family. You know, some people don't trust atheists. They don't want them in their like hotel, or you know, an atheist could never be a president of the United States at the moment. And that kind of discrimination, whether you think it was justified or not, you can see how it might make them feel a bit like annoyed. Maybe it's justified and then the atheists are all wrong or whatever, but even then they're going to perceive it as unfair. And then if they live in this world where 99% of people are religious, they're going to face this persecution quite a lot. And you could see them, at least some of them, becoming quite angry about it. And the reason I say this isn't, it's not unique to atheists, but this is the thing you see with, I've encountered people saying this about LGBT people before. Like I've met like straight cis people saying, why are all LGBT people so angry? Or you hear it as well, like, why are all feminists so angry? And it's like, well, we're not. And if you get in a situation where everyone's just relaxed and everyone can be friends, they're just nice, normal people. But they live in a world where they encounter a lot of resistance for them just trying to get on with their life. And they get comments and they get prejudice and oppression. And I'm not saying from you at all. It only needs to be from a small amount of people. Like, you know, most men aren't sexist, horrible dickheads, but some of them are. And it's enough that every single woman has experienced it. And maybe not even every single man has even noticed it happening. And that then puts you in this situation where when you meet someone, every time it's like, oh God, are they going to be an anti-LGBT person? Oh no, is this going to be a religious person who's going to persecute atheists? And that can make you tired and worn out and more easy to anger and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not making excuses for anyone who's horrible. If someone's horrible to you, that's bad. But it's good to sometimes look at these kind of like social dynamics and understand, oh, maybe there's some false barrier in between us here, which is causing us to not see eye to eye before we even get going. And then also maybe there's some kind of structural thing going on here, which might mean this person doesn't have as much like social power as I do, and that might make them feel on the defensive. I guess what I would say is maybe you've been talking to me and Ben today and you thought, oh, these two are horrible and this has confirmed what I always thought. In which case, I don't know, I can only apologize. But maybe it'd be good to go and try and give another chance and just try and reset and be like, I'm going to try and make friends with an atheist. Even if I'm never going to agree with them, even if I think they're sinners, I'm just going to try and like, we won't talk about our disagreements and we'll just try and find something nice. I mean, if you want to chat to an atheist and you thought I was tolerable, you're welcome to look me up on Twitter and I'd happy to talk to you in DMs. But like, maybe you just need to meet a nice atheist to realize that some of them are okay. I think I'm okay.
Yeah.
5 out of
Any
10.
kind of last thoughts? Because we're nearing the end of the show, but I want to let you say any last comments that you might have.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I will call back later. I just feel
please
like
do.
the world is in turmoil, like an angel has fallen, and we need to have someone to sort of come in and fix it, because there's so much division going on with Trump and just it's just horrible. And I want there to be some sort of transcendence, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot going on right now, and I hope that we can find more unity even across these barriers. So definitely call back in later, and hopefully we can have a chat soon.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll talk to some nice atheists, either next time you call in or in the meantime.
All right. Well, that was a great show. We had a lot of interesting variety of calls today. How did you feel, Katie?
Yeah, it's good. I feel like I ranted off a bit on all of them. I hope I didn't like block you out too much.
Well, if you all in the audience enjoyed what you saw and heard today on the show, there are ways that you can support the channel. Once again, below the chat, we have a fundraiser, and 100% of the proceeds go directly to the ACA, and YouTube does not take anything out of that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Those are some free ways that you can help support the content. Become a member. Click the join button down below the video. You can support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. We also have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcast. You can also become part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. Also, after this, you can make sure to check out the newest version of the ACA show, The Nonprofits, which will air live at 3 p.m. Central Time today at tiny.cc/YTNP. And of course, Katie and I just show up and we talk on Sundays, but there are people behind the scenes running the show. So let's go to the crew cam. Thank you.
Back crew.
The back crew cam. Thank you for all of your hard work. You all are amazing, and we couldn't do any of this without you.
Good to see so many hardworking bats behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, and you can't even tell that they're bats. I know people can always tell, but you can't always tell that they're bats. So, Katie, would you like to help me throw out some love rings to the audience?
Sending out frog love rings.
Sticky frog love rings. Thank you to all of our viewers. Whether or not you believe, if you are an essential worker, we want to thank you for all of the hard work that you've put in and all the hard work that you continue to do. If you don't believe, this is your community. You don't need a church to have a place to go. We're your family. Join us for the live shows in the studio if you're able. And if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.